Greetings and welcome back to room 303, and we are now nearing the end of our study of Gibran's The Prophet. We turn now to lecture 27 on religion. In some ways you could argue it's so predictable that this is where we are now. Al-Mustafa will say at the very beginning, all I've been speaking about has been religion. Now, there's no question that here again we're going to see Gibran's romantic intuition. All humans are inherently good, divine, to use the language of Emerson in one of his famous essays. And I think Emerson stands behind a whole lot of the prophet, but I think Emerson stands very much behind this understanding, his views on religion. Now, our assumptions are that you've been following our stuff at learnstrong.net down that left-hand side, our playlist. I'm hopeful that you have already been introduced to our introductory set of comments as well as all of our preceding lectures, including just recently on beauty. Now, there's no question, this will not shock us, that Gibran will be playing with the integralist view that will recognize religion as really nothing more than the respect for rhythms. That will be fundamental. I mean, the word religion in English, of course, has this connotation of related to something like church or something like that. But of course, the word itself actually just means to repeat. If, for example, you brush your teeth religiously, we hope you do, that just means that you do it every day or you do it consistently. Of course, the word religion comes to be applied to what we think of as religious observances because that's the goal of Mass, for example, within the Catholic tradition, to attend Mass religiously, and therefore we have the use of that word. Now for Gibran, religion will be the source and the fountainhead of all surprise, all wonder, and of course awe. The goal, of course, and this won't shock us again, when you get to the end of the prophet, if you've read all the previous poems, it won't shock you that perspicacity is central. That is to say, the ability to see insight, perspicacity, to see your whole life as worship and therefore sacred. And of course, the whole notion that one must love while doing certain things or acting religiously. That is to say, the heart is going to be way more important than certain kinds of religious laws. Many have made that distinction between religious and spiritual, right? And again, as we say, religion here will be the respect of what it is that we repeatedly do, our rhythms, and in some ways, then we're back to the very first line of our discussion at the beginning lecture. We are the stories that we tell and retell. We're the stories we decide to accept or to reject. That is true for us individually. That's true for us, of course, as a peoples as well. That is to say, in the end, that being, for Gibran, is way more important than doing. Note the distinction between writing a poem, for example, and being a poet. Playing music and being a musician, painting a picture and being an artist. Well, one, of course, is just formal actions. The other, of course, assumes a certain kind of wonder or awe, dare we say it, a certain kind of spiritual view of who one is. Let's enjoy it. Notice we'll begin with an old priest. I think it's key that it's old. That is to say, a priest who is very interested, of course, in keeping the correct observations, what some have called the smells and bells, religion itself, versus a certain kind of spiritual attitude. And yet notice that the idea of it's way more important who we are than what we do. This priest maybe wants to have a better understanding of the formalities of the practice of religion. And he said, the old priest said, "Speak to us of religion." And he said, now note the irony, "Have I spoken this day of aught else?" Now we're coming to the end of this day, of course, with our next passage to be death. That will be the final passage. And then, of course, the farewell after that. So we're coming to the end of the day, and he says, hey guys, the whole time I've been talking about religion. It's just that now we're going to address that formal term of religion. And it won't shock us that Gibran, of course, is going to play around with edges, right? Notice he'll say it. Is not, again, the rhetorical questions, is not religion all deeds and all reflection? Again, rhythms. And that which is neither deed nor reflection, but a wonder and a surprise ever springing in the soul, even while the hands hew the stone or tend the loom. All of life is worship. And I think Gibran learned a lot of this in his study of the Bhagavad Gita. That is to say, whatever it is that you're doing, make sure that you do it well. And of course, the biblical phrasing as well, whatever your hands find to do, do it with all your might. In other words, always, whatever you're doing, try to inject that sense, he calls it, of wonder and surprise, awe, we might say. And then he continues with these rhetorical questions. Who can separate, this is the integral view, right? Who can separate his faith from his actions, or his belief from his occupations? Who can spread his hours before him, saying, quote, this is for God, and this is for myself, this for my soul, and this other for my body, end quote. It's clear that if Gibran has problems with formal religion, it is this tendency to kind of see certain things as being important for deity, and then everything else I can do whatever I want. I can, for example, attend religious observances, and I can talk about love, but I don't have to compel myself to actually live out love, generosity, grace. And for Gibran, there's a serious problem there. And then I'll come back to this word all. Notice early it was all deeds, all reflection. Here it is. All your hours, and then this is pure Gibran as poet, the genius of him. All your hours and wings that beat through space from self to self. Wow. All your hours are wings that beat through space from self to self. I love this idea of self to self, because earlier, of course, he was talking about the God self in Crime and Punishment and elsewhere. That idea that we are always evolving. Yes, we're always kind of growing, and the process of growing is a recognition that everything that we do should be laced with this sense of awe, this sense of wonder, this sense of surprise, as he will say it. The wind and the sun will tear no holes in his skin. In other words, you can't be hurt if you have this orientation. And he who defines his conducts by ethics, that is to say, keeping laws, imprisons his songbird in a cage. Of course, that is to say, laws are always seemingly counterproductive to freedom for Gibran. Songbird in a cage immediately makes us think, no doubt, of our Maya Angelou and her famous Caged Bird poem. We talked about it at learnstrong.net. Then he'll continue. The freest song, notice, it always comes back to singing. I think a lot of this is his influence, the influence upon him by Walt Whitman. We've given full lectures of Leaves of Grass and especially Song of Myself. I think there's a whole lot of those ideas standing here. The freest song comes not through bars and wires. And he to whom worshiping is a window to open but also to shut, has not yet visited the house of his soul, whose windows are from dawn to dawn. Well, what are we talking about here? Spiritual maturity. When you finally have developed spiritually, you'll see every part of your life as somehow religious, meaning the things I really need to do, I do those things. That is to say, I repeat them, that is to say, religiously. Notice how he always brings it down now. And I love this about Gibran. He always brings it down to the normal, to the day-to-day. Notice, your daily life is your temple. Think they are, of course, in front of a temple, yes. And your religion. In other words, respecting rhythms is religion for Gibran, right? Whenever you enter into it, that is to say, the temple of your daily life, take with you your all. Again, whatever your hands find to do, do it with all your might. Take the plow and the forage and the mallet and the lute, in other words, work as worship. The things you have fashioned in necessity or for delight. For in reverie, you cannot rise above your achievements nor fall lower than your failures. In other words, if you have this sense of wonder, this sense of awe, then you will forever be enjoying in the ability to do work, and it will be meaningful work. Doesn't matter what that work is. And take with you, now to finish, and this won't shock us either, because for Gibran, he'll always start with the individual. In other words, he would make the argument, leave the world a more mindful, a more awakened place than you found it. But you have to begin first with yourself and then worry about others. It can't be in the reverse. Notice we often find ourselves wanting to change everyone around us, but we're unwilling to apply that certain kind of critical analysis to ourselves. Here he'll say, when you can do this, when you have this perception, this understanding of work as being worship, as being a sense of awe, surprise, wonder, then you can begin to think about everyone else. Notice how he says it. And take with you, when you do this activity of work, all men, back to community, right? For in adoration, you cannot fly higher than their hopes, nor humble yourself lower than their despair. We're all connected together. In the process of doing your work, of living your life religiously, you will recognize that everyone else is connected to you in powerful ways. And finally he finishes, and if you would know God, be not therefore a solver of riddles. I'm reminded of Aquinas' famous dream at the end of his Summa Theologica. He has this dream where he's carrying a spoon over to the ocean, and he gets a little tiny bit of the ocean water, and he comes back and he dumps it on the beach. And an angel comes to him in the dream and says, "What do you, what's going on?" And I've got this in reverse. He's seeing this person doing this, and he walks up, and the angel will report, "Oh, I'm doing theology." And we're told that in that moment that Aquinas began to doubt so much of the project of Summa Theologica, as majestic as it is, of course. That is to say, it can't be solving riddles all the time as being the heart of what we will consider the religious life. And think of it this way, and I think he learned this from his study of Hindu texts. You'll remember, see yourself in all being in yourself. I think this is the understanding of love. And of course, love is the breath of the universe. And in that regards, that understanding is in fact God for Gibran. And of course, once you gain this, well, then you've understood his view of prayer, his view of religion, his view of worship, his view of all, his view of life in all of its ways. And if you would know God, be not therefore a solver of riddles, rather look about you. Again, look, perspicacity, see, true sight, and you shall see him playing with your children. This takes us back, of course, to the Matthew 18, 2-5 passage. If you want to be like the kingdom of God, be like children. And look into space, and you shall see him walking in the cloud, outstretching his arms in the lightning and descending in rain. I think of Shelley's Ode to the West Wind. You shall see him smiling in flowers, then rising and waving his hands in trees. It won't shock us that Gibran always loves, much like Whitman, much like Emily Dickinson, to come back to the world of nature as his proof text, as he is beginning to talk about the sacred and that which fills him with awe. Well, what are we going to do with a set of lines like this at 2a? Well, I think his argument is that religion is not so much what you do, but rather who you are. And at your core, fundamentally, the kind of way, the attitude, the grace that you approach all of the activities of your life. This sacred attitude, I think he would argue it this way, ties us then to everyone else. If you can have this view, and often when I speak with teachers, I will point out that teaching is not a work for us, but rather it's a longing to connect in all ways with our students, with our colleagues, with our with those of the community. And in the process of doing that, we come to understand that it isn't really what we're doing in the classroom as much as what we're being in the classroom that matters. At 2b, I love the power of the rhetorical questions throughout all of the prophet, but certainly in this passage. At 3a, well, I can't help but think of Thoreau's Walden. I mentioned at the top Emerson's essays, and of course Walt Whitman's Leaves of Grass, and all of the collective works of Emily Dickinson. We've at LearnStrong.net given so many lectures on all of those thinkers and most of their texts, and in that regards, I just would point you that way. I would like to finish, though, by suggesting that you guys run to ground one of the true great texts on world religions, Houston Smith's Religions of the World. There are two ways to study religions, as we've commented on often in 303. One is to talk about what's right or what's wrong with religion. That's what we call an apologetic study of religions. So, for example, if you grew up in a religion where you were told yours is right, others are wrong, that's an apologetic study of religions. If, for example, you study your Karl Marx, where he talks about religion as the opiate of the masses, that's an apologetic study, what's wrong with religion. But there is another way to study religions. It's what we call the non-apologetic approach. And that is, we're not looking to defend or argue against that religion. We just simply want to know, what is it that people who practice that religion, what is it that they actually believe? I can't offer you a better single text to do that than Houston Smith's Religions of the World, so that you can just pick that up. And of course, for those of you that don't know, Houston Smith, one of the greatest integralist thinkers of all time, certainly in regards to religious practice, and he will, I think, follow in the spirit of Gibran well for you. Finally, at 3b. Well, what are your thoughts about this? How well do you understand your own rhythms? The way in which, for example, you study your own rhythms, go back to our study of Thoreau's Walden and energy conservation model. You'll remember, simplify, simplify, simplify. That argument that I went to the woods because I wished to live deliberately for only the essential facts. What are those essential facts? And the recognition and the practice of those essential facts, those rhythms, that is, in fact, religion? Well, of course, as we've already commented for Gibran, once you're there, you're ready to end these magnificent poems with his treatment of death. Thank you.